Hello, I'm Gareth Edwards. Over the next 15 minutes, we're going to take a very special look back at former President Thabo Mbeki's testimony at the arms deal inquiry this week. He appeared before the Seriti Commission of Inquiry into the controversial arms deal of 1999. At the time, Mbeki headed a 5-member cabinet committee that oversaw the deal that's being dogged by allegations of mismanagement and corruption for years.
15 years after his government signed off on the purchase of an array of Navy and Air Force equipment, former President Thabo Mbeki will answer questions about his role in that process. Mbeki was directly represented in negotiations with arms suppliers and, like his negotiator, is likely to be taken to task about the cost of the deal. He is also expected to be questioned about the so-called offset programs, meant to compensate for the expenditure by stimulating local industry.
The employment impact of an investment program like the defense procurement program is always inclined towards the negative, because you have a cost that is being incurred, which impacts negatively on the economy.
Mbeki is also likely to face some direct questions about arms deal corruption and kickbacks.
It's an opportunity for him, I think, as a former president, to really take not only the nation into his confidence, but rather to start talking the truth around the arms deal.
The irony is uncanny. Thabo Mbeki spent much of his presidency fending off claims that he was orchestrating the prosecution of Jacob Zuma for arms deal corruption. Now, a commission mandated by Zuma as president has hauled Mbeki out of retirement to account for the same arms deal. Thulasizwe Simelane, Johannesburg.
Mbeki's evidence was expected to finally shed some of that light into these decisions behind the deal. He took the stand on Thursday morning in Pretoria.
The truth and the whole truth. So raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
The truth is something that's evaded critics of the costly arms deal for 15 years. Thabo Mbeki's administration signed an agreement that was meant to strengthen the defense force, create jobs and boost investment. Few of these promises materialized, and international companies allegedly paid hefty bribes to deliver equipment the military barely used. But Mbeki says it was important to change the image of the defense force associated with the apartheid era.
It was necessary in a democratic South Africa to reposition the national defense force in the eyes of the people of the country. And of course, it also had this other negative experience with regard to the region. The SADF had been a big source of instability in the region. Lots of people killed and destroyed and so on.
At the time, Mbeki was the driving force behind economic development in Africa. He's insisted that all final decisions in the procurement process were made by cabinet and not by any individual.
Several lawyers indicated that they did want to cross-examine Mbeki. The first was Advocate Paul Hoffman. He appeared before the inquiry on behalf of Terry Crawford Brown, whose efforts had led to the investigation. Not surprisingly, the escalating cost of the arms deal was one of the key issues.
What I'm going to do next, Mr. Mbeki, is try to place a chronological context on how it came about that South Africa spent what was initially going to be 6 billion rand on armaments, which was then revised to 10 billion rands, and by the time the deal was done, it was 30 billion rands, and if we read in the newspapers today, it is 90 billion rands. What I want to do is put all of that in chronological context, on the basis of your particular role.
Chairperson, a learned colleague is putting misleading statements. There was never any stage where the cost of this acquisition was going to be 6 billion rand.
And then secondly, Mr. Hoffman, if I remember, we have had a lot of evidence, even from Treasury. Nobody ever mentioned 90 billion rand. I'm not sure where you get that figure from.
Right. The figure to which Mr. Marani is complaining is the one in the Defence Review way back in the 90s, and the 90 billion is the figure that is now being, and as I put it, bandied about. I don't say it's an accurate figure in the press today.
Can we just try and stick to facts?
Instead of answers, though, the legal team representing the state had objected to a lot of the questions put to the former president. ENCA spoke to arms deal activist Henny van Vieren on the first day of Mbeki's testimony.
We remain critical of the conduct of the Commission, but our position is to engage as much as we can and to use the space to be able to access information. I think none of us who participate here necessarily see this as a complete farce. We see shortcomings in the work of the Commission, but the place to engage right now is here. And we've never had an opportunity like we had today with former President Thabo Mbeki appearing before a Commission and people who've been critical of aspects of the arms deal being able to ask some of the tough questions. And I think it was indeed important that we were able to ask the questions. If we look at the statement that former President Mbeki produced, a couple of pages. We're talking about a 5-page document that the evidence leaders breezed through. This is a man of great intellect who's written extensively. We shouldn't forget who used to write regular columns on a weekly basis for the ANC that was critical of those who criticized aspects of the arms deal. He has the attention to detail, but yet when he was put under pressure said, I couldn't remember, I'm not sure if I was there, that was long ago, it was 15 years ago. It's contrary to what we know about Mr. Thabo Mbeki as a man, as an intellectual and as a politician. And I think it therefore is crucial that we can ask those questions.
The first day at the arms deal inquiry was one of heated arguments, tears and even emotional outbursts. Mbeki defending that multi-billion rand weapons procurement, saying it was within constitutional parameters. But the former president lost his cool during cross-examination by arms deal critics.
Emotions explode.
Mr. Mbeki, I beg you, think about it. What have we done? What has your cabinet done?
As long-time arms deal critics finally come face to face with the man at the center of decision-making.
I've come here today to not deal with minions, but to ask the man who was in charge.
I'm really quite angry at Mr. Hoffman. You're talking about my colleagues here as minions. These are not minions. They might be minions in his eyes, but I don't know if this entitles him to making statements like this.
Shedding a few tears at times. At issue whether or not former Defence Minister Joe Modise unduly influenced the purchase of more expensive trainer and fighter aircraft. Earlier, Mbeki's testimony echoed his former cabinet colleagues, saying the weapons were desperately needed and were acquired within the law. He's also rejected allegations that members of cabinet accepted bribes.
There's been absolutely nobody who's presented any evidence of any kind of bribery in terms of people who were involved in the processing, particularly the IMC, the processing of the acquisition.
Arms deal critics aren't impressed that Mbeki submitted a terse 5-page statement to the Commission. They've also criticized the former president for repeatedly resorting to phrases like, I do not remember, and it was a long time ago, in response to many of their questions. Thulasizwe Simelane, Pretoria.
While there were tense moments at the inquiry, analysts have weighed in on Mbeki's reputation. Analyst Professor Stephen Friedman told Newsnight's Jeremy Maggs that Mbeki's testimony will do little to taint his political legacy.
I certainly don't think that will go away. I think some people were looking for some sort of revelation where it would become clear that he was involved. I don't think that certainly didn't happen today. I'd be very surprised if it happened. I think where he may have a problem later on, as I say, is if very serious evidence is found, he has accepted collective responsibility for that. That doesn't mean that he did anything wrong himself, but it means that he's responsible for whatever wrongdoing there was.
Mbeki ended his long-awaited testimony in less than 2 days. Much of the final questions dealt with receiving a commission and paying bribes.
Thabo Mbeki's second day before the Arms Deal Commission turned out to be a tango of two minds.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term opportunity costs.
The last time I studied this, I was doing a junior degree many years ago.
If Mbeki's refrain on the first day was, "I do not remember," on the second day it was, "Those issues have already been canvassed," referring of course to his former cabinet colleagues who have faced similar questions at this commission about the arms deal's costs and benefits. When asked to clarify the commissions that arms supplier BAE has admitted to paying, Mbeki hit back.
The mere fact of paying a commission to somebody who's commissioned to go and do whatever is not a bribe to that person. It becomes a bribe when the person who's a decision maker is then bought in order to take particular decision.
And the one issue that dogged Mbeki's presidency has returned to haunt him. De Vos asked if Mbeki's government sacrificed HIV/AIDS drugs in favor of weapons.
Mr. Mbeki, but the fact of the matter is the decision not to roll out the ARV treatment at the time, 1998, 1999, was because of the effect it would have on the budget.
The matter about for affordability of antiretroviral drugs then was not a matter only in dispute here in South Africa, in discussion only. It was a global discussion about the price of these drugs.
Mbeki ended off by reiterating his challenge for anyone with evidence that cabinet ministers accepted bribes to come forward. Thulasizwe Simelane, Pretoria.
The first round of evidence focused on the rationale behind this deal. 13 witnesses will be called to appear in the next phase of the public hearings. Among them are outspoken critics of the deal, as well as Patricia de Lille, widely acknowledged as the whistleblower. ENCA will, of course, bring you coverage of their testimonies when the Commission of Inquiry resumes. For the moment, from myself, Gareth Edwards, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
You deserve to know more. ENCA.com